So one of the big topics before UFC 240 was whether or not Max Holloway is the featherweight GOAT or the featherweight greatest of all time. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go through the three fighters who are considered in contention for that. So that's Max Holloway, that's Jose Aldo, and that is Conor McGregor. I'm going to lay out the cases for each of them, why each of them could make an argument that they should be the featherweight GOAT, and I'll let you guys know who I'm picking. If you guys have listened to my podcast already, this is a lead segment on episode 12, but I'm also doing a standalone video here to talk about it as well. So if you've already heard it, all the points I'm bringing up right now are the same. If you haven't, then you can hear it now, and then maybe when you get to the podcast, you can skip through that part. So with Max Holloway, we're going to look at all of his fights in the UFC. Just look at what his resume is, and then go from there. So his debut was all the way back in 2012 against Dustin Poirier. Pretty tough debut. He came in at 4-0, and it's kind of crazy because he's 21-4 right now. So he's gotten quite a bit of experience in the UFC, and has been pretty successful at that. So I know a lot of times people get worried that a fighter will be brought into the UFC too young and they'll be forced up the ranks too fast, and then all of a sudden their career can be derailed. There's definitely a reason to believe that sentiment, but I guess Max Holloway is an example where that wasn't the case, where even though he got brought in pretty early and pretty young, he still managed to have quite the career, and that's what I'm saying right now. He's got plenty of time left, and I'm sure he can accomplish a lot more. So his debut, lost to Dustin Poirier, then beat Pat Schilling, beat Justin Lawrence, beat Leonard Garcia, lost to Dennis Bermudez in a split decision that he probably should have won, lost to Conor McGregor, and then went on a giant winning streak at featherweight. So he beat Will Chope, beat Andre Fili, beat Clay Collard, beat Akira Corisani, beat Cole Miller, beat Queb Swanson, beat Charles Oliveira, beat Jeremy Stevens, beat Ricardo Lamas, Anthony Pettis, Jose Aldo twice, Brian Ortega, moved up to lightweight for a chance at an interim title there, lost to Dustin Poirier, and then just beat Frankie Edgar. So if you're looking at the best argument for why Max Holloway is the greatest featherweight of all time, your argument would be that he has two wins over Jose Aldo, who has the argument on paper in terms of having the most title defenses. And so if it's just a two-horse race between him and Jose Aldo, the reason why he would be ahead of Aldo is because he's beaten Aldo twice. If you're going to ask about him versus Conor McGregor, the argument would be that he lost to Conor early in his career, and the current version of Max Holloway is better than the version of Conor McGregor that was a champion. And that was a champion who never defended his title, no less. So that's your argument for Max Holloway. Next person to make an argument would be Jose Aldo. On paper, he would have the strongest argument, assuming that your argument is based off of what they've accomplished rather than how good they are as an actual fighter. So if you're making this fighter a GOAT debate just based off of what's there on paper, Jose Aldo wins that debate, and the debate doesn't need to be continued. I can stop this video right now. Personally, I don't think that's the best way to do a GOAT debate. I think a GOAT debate is better off or better done when you're actually looking at skill sets and how good the fighter was in their prime or at their best. So with that in mind, and it's kind of unfortunate to look at his record and see all the losses there. But let's go back to his debut, and I'm going to do a Zuffa debut, not a UFC debut. So we're going to look at the WEC because the WEC was effectively the UFC of the featherweight division before they had merged. So he came in back in June of 2008, beat Alexander Nogueira, beat Jonathan Brookins, beat Rolando Perez, beat Chris Mickle, beat Cub Swanson, got a title shot. So this is his first chance at a Zuffa featherweight title shot against Mike Brown, defeated him, and then went on to defend his belt from there. So he beat Uriah Faber, beat Manny Gambarian, beat Mark Hominick. That was his UFC debut against Mark Hominick. Beat Kenny Florian, beat Chad Mendes, beat Frankie Edgar, beat Chan Sung Jung, beat Ricardo Lamas, beat Chad Mendes, had the loss to Conor McGregor, but then went and beat Frankie Edgar in an interim title fight, had the two losses to Max Holloway, then beat Jeremy Stevens, beat Renato Moicano, and then just had the loss to Alex Volkanovski. So the argument that you would make for Jose Aldo being the GOAT would be, one, he's got the most title defenses out of anyone. So he had the 9 straight defenses after winning the title against Mike Brown. So Max Holloway, I believe, is at 4 defenses right now. So Aldo hasn't beat there. And the other argument you could make is that Jose Aldo trained out of Novo União, which is a camp that was pretty infamous for sparring too hard, a camp where guys went really, really hard at it. So he had a lot of really talented training partners. He'd have a lot of hard sparring days with them. So he took a lot of damage in those training sessions. So by the time that he got to fight Max Holloway in 2017, he was 9 years into his Zuffa career at that point, but had plenty of other time in his career then too. Probably had a lot of damage on him. And therefore, the version that had lost to Max Holloway wasn't really the prime Aldo that won the title and defended against some of his best opponents. So the argument would be, yes, Max Holloway does have the head-to-heads, but the Jose Aldo that Max Holloway beat wasn't the prime Jose Aldo. And if you're going to make that case, I guess the best way to make that case would then to be explain what specifically about Jose Aldo wasn't there in the fights that could have been there if it had happened at an earlier date. The one area that you could probably bring up would be the leg kicks. So I don't know that Aldo was necessarily bad at taking punches in the Holloway fights. He took a lot of punches before he went out in both fights. Uh, Showed some toughness, showed some chin, or showed a good chin. So it's not as though he just got clipped once, fell down, sort of like the Conor McGregor fight, and that was it. It was more of a volume thing. Max Holloway showed that he was a better boxer, but the leg kicks of Jose Aldo that he was famous for early in his career just weren't there in either of the Holloway fights. And an argument could be made that when you kick as hard as Jose Aldo does to the legs, one of the dangers of throwing hard kicks is that if you hit a knee, or if you hit an elbow, or if you get your kick checked, it hurts extremely badly and you can do a lot of damage to yourself. So you could say that at that point in his career, he hadn't been throwing as many kicks recently, and that's probably because of some damage that he had taken, getting his kicks checked or getting his kicks bounced off of knees or elbows. And so the version of Aldo that fought Holloway wasn't as willing to throw leg kicks. Had he been willing to throw the leg kicks that he was famous for, he would have been able to take away from Holloway's movement. And had he been able to take away from Holloway's movement, he would then be able to be a lot more successful in the boxing because Holloway wouldn't be able to get in and out as easily. So that would be the best argument for Jose Aldo, is that the version that fought Holloway wasn't at his best. He's got the most defenses on paper, so therefore he should be considered the featherweight GOAT. The other one who is in this argument, and the only reason he's in this argument is because of his head-to-head against the two of them, because other than that, he really doesn't have that comparable of a resume. So if we're going to look at Conor McGregor and his featherweight resume, he debuted in the UFC back in 2013, beat Marcus Brimage, beat Max Holloway, then beat Diego Brandao, beat Dustin Poirier, beat Dennis Seaver, beat Chad Mendes, and beat Jose Aldo. So that was when he won the featherweight title. He would never fight at featherweight again after beating Jose Aldo. So from a standpoint of how many wins at featherweight or how many title defenses is concerned, obviously Conor McGregor is behind both of them. His argument is that if the point of who's the best is who on any given night would beat the others, Conor could make an argument there because he did beat Aldo and he did beat Holloway. So like I mentioned with Holloway, his best argument for being ahead of Aldo is that he has the wins over Aldo. Well, then Conor could kind of go off of that same logic and say, well, I've got the win over Holloway and I've got the win over Aldo. The argument that would be made from there is obviously he doesn't have all the title defenses that everyone else has. So you'd have to say that he's clearly better than Max Holloway and clearly better than Jose Aldo. The Aldo one is tough because it was a 13-second knockout. You really didn't get to see a whole lot play out there. But I'll give him the benefit of the doubt on that one. As far as the Max Holloway fight goes, that was a fight where, as the fight went on, and as is the case for most Max Holloway fights, Max Holloway was getting a better read on him. He was doing a lot better on the feet. So had it been 5 rounds, you never know how it goes. Now, obviously, Holloway lost all 3 rounds, so he probably loses that fight if it's 5 rounds back in 2013. But the current version of Holloway, the current version that just defended 14 out of 15 takedowns against Frankie Edgar, is he going to be taken down by Conor McGregor and pounded on like he was in the first fight? Probably not. I think there's a good argument to be made that the current Max Holloway that is the champion right now would have beaten pretty much any version of Conor McGregor that you can pick. Conor can definitely do some damage on the feet, but it's not like he was like knocking Max Holloway onto his ass at all when he was fighting the first time. So it's not like the power is just going to overwhelm Max Holloway. And as we saw in the first fight, Holloway was able to make his reads and make some adjustments. So if they fight again, Holloway would have the advantage of having fought him before and have some reads kind of preset in. But I think if you're in a 5-round fight, especially with the pace that Holloway puts up, I'd see Holloway winning that fight. So to me, Max Holloway at his best would have the edge over Conor McGregor. Therefore, it then becomes a question of Max Holloway versus Jose Aldo. I think that the argument that Jose Aldo would have been more effective with his leg kicks that we saw early in his career, it's a decent argument, but I still think Holloway at his best beats Aldo at his best, and for that reason, I have Max Holloway as the featherweight GOAT.